What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Today I'm going to be teaching you some advice I wish I knew when I first got started practicing street photography. So if you're a beginner to street photography, this is the perfect video for you. I'll be giving you an overview, looking at some of my photographs, contact sheets, behind the scenes videos, sharing some of my ideas about the mindset, philosophy, and where to find inspiration in street photography. And so right off the bat, I just want to share with you that I've been practicing street photography for a decade now, honing in on my craft, traveling throughout all of the world. And so a lot of these photographs that you're going to be seeing here in color are throughout my travels and throughout my journey. I also am going to be sharing with you some black and white images that are more work in progress and some of the new stuff that I'm working on. And so I believe that ultimately, the first thing that I want to share with you about street photography and just photography in general and the philosophy about why practicing street photography matters is ultimately I find that photography fuels my lust for life, right? It's about seeing the world through your own personal curiosities. And ultimately, there isn't no one way to do this thing. There is no 1, 2, 3, ABC. This is how you practice street photography. And ultimately, I believe that photography has nothing to do with photography. And what I mean by this is photography has everything to do with how you engage with humanity out there in the open world. And so ultimately, a photographer's ability to go out there in the world to engage with humanity is going to reflect back in the photographs you make. And so if you're open and you're curious and you're getting close to people, that's going to reflect in the photographs. If you're shy and you're bashful and you're shooting with a longer lens, those photographs will reflect your vision. And I believe that this is important to hone in on as we look at some of these photographs, because what you'll notice about my approach to street photography is I like to get close. And so a photograph is a reflection of your courage. A photographer is responsible for positioning themselves on the front lines of life. And I believe this is the duty of the street photographer, and the core trait that you must possess is courage. And actually, if you look at the etymology of the word courage, core meaning heart, I believe a photograph is a reflection of your heart. And so just as much as we're photographing the world around us, we can create our own world through reflecting our soul in the photographs that we make. And I believe this comes naturally through going out there and practicing street photography daily. And ultimately, street photography, it's a numbers game. You're going to have to go out there and practice daily with repetition. You're going to have to go out there and be consistent. And over time, your vision will develop. And so one of the things that I did right off the bat of my journey is study photo books. This is one of the most important things that I can share with you. I encourage you, if you already have a camera, just use whatever camera you have. Buy photo books instead, right? Photo books are much more valuable. My favorite photo book is flipping on the screen right now. It's Larry Tal, The Mennonites, which takes you into this new world. For me, the power of photo books is its ability to transport you into these new places and experience the worlds that the photographers capture. And they inspire you and awaken your soul to go out there and explore the world, right? They teach you to see differently. They give you ideas and fundamentals on how you can approach composition. And so I encourage you to maybe visit the Magnum Photos website, view some of their photographers, find some of the photo books that they've created and resonate with you, and pick them up, because this is going to be your building block for how you can develop your own personal vision, is through studying the compositions, the approach, and the vision of the masters of photography. And so your next picture is your best picture. Street photography is an endless stream of becoming. When you look at these masters of photography, when you look at some of these great photographs, you may feel discouraged. You may feel like you're never going to be able to achieve this. You're never going to be able to go out there and make these grand photographs and make all of this impact with your work. But ultimately, what one must possess is a life-affirming mindset, where you need this mantra in your approach, where when you go out there and you're photographing, do not expect to come home with anything. I can tell you with 100% certainty, after all of the years of me photographing, 99.9% of the time, you return home empty-handed. And so you must learn to embrace failure and simply photograph for the sake of photographing. Photograph for the joy of it, and allow the pictures to come naturally. And treat photography as an endless stream of becoming, where your next photograph that you click that shutter will be your next photograph. And through affirming that mindset, you will improve your photography. And so I can encourage you to think lucky in order to be lucky. And I think that through going out there with a positive attitude and gratitude for the simple pleasure of walking and embracing the moment and traveling and going to new places, you will be delivered with God's graces of these beautiful moments, truly. And so I find that travel is the ultimate teacher. And so don't worry about the cameras. Don't worry about the lenses. If you have a camera, even if you have an iPhone, honestly, at this point, like, cameras are so easy to use and simple. It really doesn't matter. Like, what matters is you going out there and exploring the world. And so I believe that, if you pick up some photo books, maybe you buy a plane ticket, go to a new place. Like, for instance, this photograph I made in Rome. Rome is a fantastic city for street photography. I also have a full YouTube series from Mumbai, India. I highly recommend, if you want to go for a trip to practice street photography, I encourage you to stay for at least 2 weeks. My personal preference is to stay for 1 month. I find that after 1 month of photographing in a particular location, I have a sense of the street's rhythm. I find myself, less hesitate. Like, I don't feel rushed when I'm traveling for a month, and I feel like I have enough time to actually develop a body of work. And so I believe that ultimately, when you go out there and you photograph in new places, this re-sparks your inspiration to continuously practice street photography. I always find that when I come home from a trip, I'm always just re-inspired. I always have this ignited fire within me once again. And, I just find that through immersing yourself in a new place, it's really the best teacher. What I like to do is I treat my hometown, Philadelphia, as my practice grounds, where I'm here and I practice daily. I walk the same route each day, and I encourage you to do the same. So find a route in your hometown and stick to it each and every day with discipline for a year straight, and photograph that same route each and every day with one camera and one lens, and become very much familiar with your surroundings. And then over time of practicing for a year, you can then take the leap to travel to a new place and come home with images that were successful because you've become warmed up and you've practiced so much. And so I encourage you to see the world as a child would. A child would be forever curious about everything around them. This is where we want to be, exploring endlessly with the mindset of a child. And so essentially when I wake up in the morning, I treat it like I'm reborn again. And when I go out onto the streets, everything I see anew with fresh perspective. And this to me is unlocking more creativity in my photography, where all of the smallest details become infinitely fascinating to me. And ultimately, when you're out there and you're photographing, you're simply asking why with each click of the shutter. Think of a kid looking around, asking why. What is this? Why? Right? That's how we want to photograph our way through life. And so I explore with this mindset of a child. I treat the world as my playground. Just like these kids playing upon this empty frame in Zambia, Africa, as I hiked around, biking through the villages, arriving at this beautiful scene with the golden light. I was there. I was playing. I'm just this big kid with a camera, exploring like a child. But I can recognize the potential for a photograph to make here. I understand the nuances of light during the golden hour as the sun is setting. I couldn't predict this moment here of the boy's eye revealing from the light in the shadow play, but I sensed the possibility of something occurring here. I was observant of that shadow in the background. I observed the way these different children were playing upon the frame. I sensed the ability to create a strong composition due to the way I broke this up with this empty frame, with that pole, with these buildings, and that tattered wall. And then the composition came naturally. The boy was positioned on the left-hand side in relationship to that shadow on the right-hand side. And what this allowed me to do was break the frame up in a very simple way using the rule of thirds. When you're out there and you're photographing, these compositions derive through your intuition. They're very simple. You simply break it up with the subject on the left-hand side, close to your camera, and then the rest of the frame in the background sort of fills itself in naturally. And I feel as though one of the simplest ways to view composition in street photography is like visual problem solving. And so ultimately, the photographer is responsible for where they position their physical body in relationship to the subject and the background. And what that means is where you position yourself physically is just as important as you view the world visually. I couldn't necessarily pre-visualize that moment happening in the split second, but what I did do is position myself in a particular way that related the different elements within my frame. And so it's very important to set your stage, to have an understanding of your background, to have an understanding about how the foreground can relate to that background, to synthesize the composition and simplify the frame. And so there is a particular way in which I work the scene out here on the streets. You can see here I'm photographing under the Coney Island boardwalk with my friend Matthew here, who's traveled throughout Israel and Palestine, Mexico City with me extensively. And so we have a very great relationship out there on the streets. And I encourage you too, if you have a friend, to photograph with a friend. And so here we're working the scene, and I'm photographing under the Coney Island boardwalk on this random weekday. And there's not many people on the beach, but I stumbled across this scene of these two people dancing, and I started to engage in conversation. I like to engage the scenes that I photograph. I like to work the scene. I'm not necessarily always just walking around like a fly on the wall photographing stealthily, but I get close and I interact with people and I listen to their stories, and I love people, so I love to chat. And so once you engage with a scene like this, you have permission to make photographs. And so I encourage you too to find a way for you to have the permission to get close to people to make photographs like this if you're curious about this process. Because ultimately there isn't one way of doing things. You can engage with the scene. You can have the ability to work the scene and make lots of photographs of the same thing over and over again to increase your chances of making a successful photograph. And so very simply put, I love people. I love engaging with people, and I always work the scene. And so as you can see here on this contact sheet, we have around 60-something photographs that I made of this particular scene to get to the keeper photo. And so I want to stress to you that a great photograph comes through lots of clicks. Like that photo you just saw from Zambia, that was lots of clicks. I made 100 photos of that scene. I'm out there, and I'm actually present when I press the shutter. I'm engaged with the scenes. I'm engaged with humanity. And then that reflects back in the photograph. And so you can see this scene as it unfolds. I'm going to flip through all of the different B-side photos and all the photos that were outtakes. But I'm going to share with you my process. I simply engaged this scene, and I just started snapshotting around. And then I got close to the woman, and we started talking. And then through that conversation, as I was talking with this woman, I was photographing her. And I just openly had that permission through body language. I didn't go up to her and say, "Oh, hi, I'm a street photographer. Can I take your picture?" No, I just approached her and I just started photographing and talking with her. And then boom, that in-between moment as we began chatting, it was before the dancing occurred that the moment occurred in front of me, and I pressed the shutter, right? And so this photograph was very simple. There's 3 elements in the frame. We have one subject, of course, in the center. This is our hero. We have our secondary character here on the right-hand side. And then in the background, this woman here walking away from the scene with that beautiful shadow reflected with the light there on the sand. And so essentially, like composition is intuition. It's where you position your body in relationship to that moment. And so as I moved around and clicked the shutter more and more and chipped away, I wound up making relationships between the foreground, middle ground, and background. And then the moment, it was the moment before the event. So a lot of these moments that I photograph, they're not necessarily of the action. Sometimes it's of the action, sometimes it's before the action. And so I simply continue to photograph through that action, right? And so, the slideshow just messed up. And so you can see I continue clicking the shutter. I continue going. I shoot through that dancing scene. I got the speaker in the hand now. I think she handed the speaker over to me, and I'm trying to make a photo. And the dancers are harder to control. The dancing moment's harder to photograph. Some of these images like here are kind of beautiful, but ultimately I appreciated the other photograph. You have like the strong moment here, right? We have the strong moment, strong gesture. But the photograph that I deem to be the keeper is stronger due to the closeness and the proximity between me and the subjects, and the composition and the simplicity of the frame. These frames are a little bit more cluttered for my liking. These photos have a little bit too much imperfection. Imperfection is good, but I believe that it's important for me to synthesize the foreground with the background, and this is the photograph that was successful in doing that. And so I believe it describes the scene kind of simply. And so, let me just redo this. And so, yeah, essentially, what is street photography, right? I'm showing you my process and how I approach street photography. I like to engage with people. I like to go out there. You're capturing spontaneous moments in public spaces, right? You're not posing people. These moments aren't staged, right? And, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't interact with people. Right? I love chatting with people and getting close to people, and then, I'm a fly on the wall in those scenes, and then I come home with a candid photo. And so I believe that ultimately, street photography, It's about uplifting humanity and championing humanity and uplifting them to a new height through the ability for us to articulate a moment in a photograph. And so street photography, it requires patience, right? It will take you around 10 years of practicing street photography to understand what you're really doing, which sounds phenomenal. I mean, this is my personal experience. You know, I feel like after a decade of doing this thing, I'm finally starting to figure things out about why I do it, what it is, and what it all means to me. And this is just the reality of my personal experience. And, you know, essentially street photography, this thing takes time. It's going to take you a lot of time, a lot of dedication, but ultimately if you simplify the process of you practicing street photography, if you simplify the workflow, if you simplify the way in which you approach this thing, you will find yourself more successful out there on the streets. You know, I don't take myself so seriously. Okay, I embrace the spirit of play when I'm on the street. You know, when I go out there, I'm not putting on my photography hat, you know, going out there, oh, today I'm going out there to tell visual stories. I'm going to change the world with each click of the shutter. It's like, no, I just go out there and I play and I tinker and I explore and I chat with people and I move and I sense the possibility that a photograph can occur. And then I'm there and I'm prepared with my camera and I respond to life as it unfolds. And so I believe that in order to achieve this sense of curiosity with your approach, one must have a beginner's mind. And so I recommend always remaining an amateur. You know, for me, even after mastering street photography, I still consider myself an amateur street photographer. An amateur is simply somebody who loves what they do. And so I encourage you to adopt the mindset of a tourist in your own city. You know, when you're a tourist in a new place, you know, you're eager to catch the sunrise. You're eager to read the plaques on the wall, to study the history, to look up, to look down, to walk slowly, and to simply let your intuition guide you through the street, right? And so this is how I approach the street when I'm walking around my hometown, Philadelphia. You know, this is a rich city with history. There's so many tourists that visit here. And so I try to blend in with the tourists as I approach the street with this beginner's mind, with this tourist mind. And I find it to be a very empowering way philosophically to shift your mindset when approaching the streets, where a lot of street photographers get bogged down by, you know, everything's been done, you know, there's only just people walking around on their cell phones and da-da-da. It's like, you're just not awake. It's like, you gotta wake up, dude. A street photographer must possess intuition, right? Life unfolds spontaneously with entropy and randomness, right? We thrive in chaos, but the superpower of photography is your ability to articulate that chaos and to put order to it within your frames. And so I believe that in order to put order to the chaos, one must possess intuition, that gut instinct to press the shutter, like a hunter out there observing with sharp visual acuity, recognizing the patterns in nature and human behavior, whether you're watching the light, the birds in flight, and the people and the way they move and dance upon the street. You know, these different patterns that exist in the world is something that we must be in tune with through our intuition, through that gut instinct to press the shutter. You know, as much as we have two eyes that are connected to our brain that allow us to see and perceive the world, the moment we press the shutter, it comes from the gut. It doesn't come from your brain, that rational mind. You must let go and embrace flow when practicing street photography. And so I encourage you to explore endlessly, to climb mountains, to explore lakes, to go to new places, to visit foreign villages, to explore bustling markets, to go to the edges of this earth. There is so much out there to do, to see, to explore, and to photograph. And that's what makes me so excited to practice street photography, is recognizing how open the world is and how the world is so open for us to go out there and to photograph. And so let's get into the nitty-gritty details. Like, what is that saying? It's fucking stupid. Keep it simple, stupid, okay? With all these cameras, lenses, trinkets, and shit, you guys got to stop with these cameras. All these street photography nerds, cameras, do you, like, I don't know, like, cameras it's a hilarious topic to me, frankly. Like, cameras, I hate cameras. Can you just use one camera, one lens, and just shut the fuck up about cameras? Like, honestly, people that get into street photography become like camera nerds. Like, oh, I'm shooting micro four thirds and I'm shooting a medium format today. I've got this new lens. Check it out, dude. It's like, do you take pictures? And so I encourage, this is my recommendation. I'm going to keep it simple as possible for you and just move the hell on with this stupid topic. Pick up a Ricoh GR3. I suggest the 3. It's much easier to use the 28, frankly. Pick up the Ricoh GR3. Shoot JPEGs. Shoot JPEGs. I shoot with the high contrast black and white JPEGs. They look beautiful straight out of camera. It simplifies the workflow. You don't have to worry about any processing, any bullshit. Let go of perfection and just move on. All of these camera systems suck. But there's one that actually is good, and that's Ricoh. And so a photograph becomes an instant sketch of light, an instant sketch of life, right? And so when you're out there and you're photographing, essentially, when you look at the world and you look at light as our medium, right? Look at the word photography, phos meaning light, graphia meaning writing or drawing, right? We're drawing with light, we're painting with light, we're creating these instant sketches of light. And ultimately, I find that when I treat light as my subject, I simply follow the light and then everything becomes beautiful, where the way that light casts upon surfaces, people, places, and things, it reveals the essence of the street. And through chipping away and photographing light itself as your subject, I suggest this to be your approach, to simply just follow the light in the way that it casts. And, through that, following of the light, you will find yourself chipping away at life. And, for me, this has always been a part of my process, is finding light and searching for that beautiful, sort of golden light, and using light as a very core sort of element within my frames, because I ultimately find that light, it can elevate something very mundane. And so in terms of daily practice, in order to improve, just walk the same route, right? Study the light, study the different characters. When I walk around Philly, I see the same dude smoking the same cigarette at the same time every single day. I see the way the light reflects off of this building at this time of day. You'll get to notice these different patterns. You'll get to notice the different changes throughout the seasons and the way that you need to position yourself on certain corners in relationship to the backgrounds and the light itself and the way that people move upon the street. And so by photographing daily and sort of walking with repetition along the same route, you will increase your chances of making something. And so you learn to embrace failure and enjoy it with street photography, right? There is no such thing as good or bad photographs, but only new photographs to make. Again, this life-affirming mindset where essentially when you let go of these preconceived ideas of what you're going to go out there and photograph or what the result of the photograph will be, you embrace this stream of productivity of making new photos, and you enter a flow state of making new photographs, what is ultimately our goal. The goal of the street photographer is to increase our curiosity by 1% each day, because ultimately, the more that you walk, the more that you see. The more that you see, the more that you photograph. And the more that you photograph, the more curious you become. And the more curious you are, the more you'll go out there and make more photographs. And so ultimately, make more damn pictures. And so through going out there with this life-affirming mindset, with the spirit of play, you enter this flow state of production. You let go of the idea of you failing. You embrace it openly, right? You say, so what? Failure is the name of the game when it comes to street photography. You're just going to keep failing, but you get back up and you just keep pressing the shutter. And so one of the things I encourage is working in the scene. You don't need to necessarily just take a photo one and done and move on, right? Shoot with confidence and presence, engage at the scene, get close to people and photograph humanity. By working the scene, you will have a better chance of making something strong. Layer your scenes through the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. Look at the world like a visual puzzle for you to solve by relating that moment to the background, by positioning your physical body in relationship to the subject. There's some very simple techniques of approaching the street to create a more compelling image. And I believe working the scene is one of the foundational ways in which we can do this, by making more pictures than you think you should. And if anything interests you by 1%, just click the shutter, right? Don't hesitate when you're out there on the street. Don't think with your rational mind, but simply let go and just photograph. And so less is more, right? Avoid cluttered backgrounds and simplify the frame. This is something that I truly believe in. I find that a lot of the times a photograph falls flat because of the background, where the subject and the moment is not necessarily relating with the background cleanly and simply. And I believe that by simplifying the frame and removing all the superfluous distractions, you can make a photograph with more impact. And so move your body around, right? Shift the angle, squat, move forward. You got to, change your height and your distance in relationship to the subject in order to create a stronger photograph with impact and to have a simple frame be made. And so the best composition requires motion. It requires you to be on your toes. And remember that photography, as much as it's this visual game of putting together a composition, it's a physical pleasure of you moving your body in position to press the shutter. And so the world is your canvas and the street is a stage. Everything is photographable. Don't limit yourself when you're out there on the streets. Photograph more. Photograph what brings you joy. Photograph what makes you happy. Photograph your inner curiosity like a child would. And so I encourage you to embrace imperfection, the blur, the grain, the sort of harsh light, it all has beauty. Let go of the idea of good or bad photos and just focus on being present in the moment, not perfection. Stop thinking too much and just do, essentially. And this is what it means to enter the flow state, is to have this sort of effortless action of clicking the shutter and moving, clicking the shutter and moving, looking, observing, clicking the shutter and moving. And then you enter this groove of working the scene, and you enter this groove of photographing, letting go of the idea of you making an imperfect photo. So the act of going out into the world, embracing chance, spontaneity, and the chaos of everyday life is what fuels my curiosity, right? For me, the camera, it's just an excuse. It's an excuse for me to go out there, to see the world, and to look at it more intensely and closely and actually be there and be present when I press the shutter. And to me, this is what it's all about. It's about treating the camera as the key that unlocks the door to the multifaceted complexities and experiences I can have in life. And then through that curiosity and through going out there and treating the camera this way, I'm always surprised at what I find. I've explored all throughout the world, throughout the streets of Philadelphia, Baltimore, Israel and Palestine, Zambia, Africa, to the mountains of Ethiopia, to the lakes of Hanoi, Vietnam, the mountaintops of Mexico, all over different places, from Rome, to the different bustling markets, neighborhoods, etc. There's just so much out there. And if you treat the camera as the simple excuse for you to actually go there and to explore the world, well, then everything else will sort of just fall naturally to you. Photographs will simply come to you when you treat photography as a way to live, to explore, and you treat each photo as life affirmation. I think that we need to wake up. We need to be present. You're not just out there watching life. You're experiencing life on the front lines of life. You're there and you're present when you press the shutter. Life isn't just a photograph, right? Life isn't in the four corners of the frame that you make. Life is outside of the four corners of the frame. Life is outside of the box, the box of limiting beliefs that we have about what makes or breaks a photograph, or where we should photograph, or what street photography is, right? You got to actually go out there and do the thing and explore and get out of the box, get out of your hometown, get out of the sort of mundane routine of your everyday life and find yourself exploring openly outside of the four corners of the frame. That's where life is. Truly, I believe the greatest gift man can leave behind on this earth is the artwork that we make. There's something special about considering each photograph you make like a new child. To me, the act of creation is a very powerful act. Right? I use art as a way for me to propagate my voice and to enhance the way that I live my everyday life. It really does enrich your life with meaning when you think of it and frame it this way. These photographs that we make can outlive us. These photographs we make can become a way for us to immortalize our souls through the act of making a photo and allowing these photos to carry on our voice. And to me, this is a very beautiful thing, and I think that it really does enhance the way I experience life generally. Like for me, photography, it simply fuels my life with meaning, and it gives me this purpose in life to continuously move forward. And through clicking the shutter each and every day, I'm saying yes to life itself. And so I encourage you to get close, but, respect people. You don't have to go around just flashing people in the face for the sake of flashing people in the face. This is, if you want to do that, go for it. I don't personally use flash. I like to get close, right? I like to be fearless and get close to people, but I like to do it in my own way. I like to, approach the streets in my own way where, I respect the subject with empathy. Honestly, I encourage you, if you're going to practice street photography, to make self-portraits of yourself first so you understand what it's like to be on the other side of the camera. Because not everybody wants their picture taken. However, by going out there and photographing and experiencing confrontation, whether good or bad, you will essentially be able to increase your confidence as a street photographer. And so one of the simple things that I encourage you to do to get more confident on the streets is just go around and just ask 10 strangers to if you can make a street portrait of them, like if you're just getting started. This is a very simple way for you to break the ice, to gain some confidence, and ultimately, if you're curious about getting close to people on the street, this is your simplest way to do so. Another thing I do is I have an Instax camera, and I've always traveled with it, and I would simply go around and make photos of different scenes and give the Instax print to strangers, and then this allowed me to break the ice and to get closer to these different scenes that I photograph. And so ultimately, your courage is your style, right? The courage that you possess is what's going to reflect back in the photograph you make. And so I believe that photography becomes a superpower because I can find endless meaning in the mundane. I mean, really, everything is so beautiful and everything becomes photographable when you have the camera in hand. Where I can walk the same lane every single day and still find new ways to create something from nothing. To me, this is the superpower of photography. It's finding meaning in the mundane. And so I encourage you to go out there and to explore through your own personal curiosities, where no one else in the world is going to see like you. Photography is a very selfish act. It's about you. Photography reveals your soul. The streets are your mirror about how you perceive and see the world around you. And so treat it as such. One of the most empowering thoughts I have about photography is that you can create a new world in a fraction of a second. And when you have no fear, and you embrace the chaos head first with your curiosity, you'll float through the world on a feather bed, untouched and unscathed. As much as the world seems scary and daunting in these moments, and how you get close to people to photograph can be, something that causes hesitation. If you embrace life's chaos openly and honestly and playfully and not so seriously, you will come out unscathed. You will come out with beautiful photographs. And so I encourage you to just do it. And so get out there, walk, shoot. Don't wait for the perfect gear or time, please. Please stop waiting for that camera and that lens. Please stop geeking over cameras and shit like that. Like street photography, that's the last thing that we care about. And so just start where you are, use what you have, use whatever camera you got, shoot wherever you are. Shoot daily, if possible. Just always have the camera in your neck. Always put the camera in your pocket. This is why the Ricoh is the best, because it just goes in your pocket. And then you'll be able to go out there and to shoot daily without any excuses. And then over time, with consistency, you will improve. And then over 6 months, maybe a year of you practicing street photography, you can take the leap and go to somewhere new and photograph in Rome, or take a trip to Mumbai and then have a new experience and come home with new photographs that re-inspire you, And so hopefully some of these ideas I shared with you can benefit you, because ultimately, while practicing street photography, I simply feel more connected to the fleeting moments of life than without a camera. I feel more present than ever. When I treat the world as my canvas, I'm just always out there scanning for potential photographs. I'm always finding meaning in the smallest nuances and things. And so when you let go of the outcome and the result of the photograph, and you simply embrace photography as a way for you to embrace the present moment generally, you will find yourself in this blissful state. And is that so bad after all? I think if you're not having fun doing this thing, it's not for you. And I endlessly find myself having joyful experiences in my everyday life because of photography. And that's why I practice street photography. Street photography simply fuels my lust for life itself, and that's why I practice street photography. And so I encourage you too to think more about why you want to practice street photography. I encourage you to perhaps delete Instagram if you have one, to create your own website. So if you want to check out my photos or more information about street photography, you can visit my website at dantesisifo.com. yeah, I encourage you to do the same. Just create your own website and have your own place to host your photos instead of, a social media platform or something like that. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. With that being said, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace.